Hey everybody, happy Sunday night. It's so weird to say Sunday night after a Union game, but this is Across the Pitch Union post game show on AAT Sports Network. My name is Mike Barrera. I don't know if I'm going to be joined tonight by anybody, whether it be Jose, Todd, Kyle, Jillian, etc. They're all at Subaru Park. I hope they've all taken a breath after we've held our breaths for the last, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes. I'm just sharing out the show on social media as I typically do before every time we do a post game show. So bear with me a few seconds here as I look around. Great, done. Let's rock and roll. Uh, there's a lot to discuss tonight. I'm not really exactly sure where to begin. As Joe says here, I need heart med stat. I think that's a great way to approach this. It was stressful enough when it was 0-0 for about 70 minutes. And then we had about 10 to 15 minutes where we were feeling really good about ourselves. We had a 2-0 lead. It just seemed like everything was going the Union's way. It felt like we were going to have our third consecutive shutout against Chicago. Everything seemed to just fall into place. And it's like, okay, early playoff tension, first half stressed. We're going to get to the subs. We're going to get the lineup and et cetera, all these things that may have led into that kind of 0-0 score for such a long period of time. But it finally opened up. We finally got the goals on the board. And then all of a sudden, the one flaw that the Union have had all season kind of crept in a bit for us tonight. So we have a lot to discuss. We'll get to the comments. I see Valerie says it didn't need to be that stressful. Absolutely not, Valerie. I completely agree. NSC joins us. Excellent PKs after UA missed. And trust me, we're going to get to the PKs. I think also something we talked about earlier this season kind of presented itself tonight when it came to PKs. So again, a lot to talk about. Let's discuss first the starting 11 because I think that was an interesting talking point, and I think something that was maybe not exactly beneficial for the Union. So for the starting 11 tonight, we had Andre Blake in net. We had the usual back three of Wagner, McConaughey, and Glesnes. However, surprisingly to me, Nathan Harriel gets a start. Now, I personally thought Frankie was going to get the start. I think a majority of Union fans, or at least a good portion of Union fans, believe Frankie is the better of the two right backs. I think that Nathan's a great one-on-one defender. We obviously know how dangerous he is on set pieces. We know how he is just athletically speaking. He's also very versatile, play center back, etc. For me personally, and for what others have said, Frankie Westfield is a bit more aggressive in the attack. His crosser a bit better. He's still a pretty good defender, so it's not like you're having a major drop off from a defensive standpoint. But we didn't see Frankie Westfield starting tonight, and I was like, okay, let's just see how this goes. The rest of the lineup was as expected. You had Milanowski, Indy Vasiliev, Lukic, and Danley as your midfielders, and then Ty Brimo and Bruno Daviani. On the bench, no surprise here. We had Andrew Rick, Alejandro Bedoya, Chris Donovan, Bizo, Ben Bender, Cavan, Bueno, Frankie, and Michael Ua. Now, an interesting thing that I want to mention, because we talked about this on our match preview, and it was mentioned in the pre-match press conference as well. Right now, the Philadelphia Union are pretty thin at midfield. As you can see here, Jeremy Raffanello is not on this rotation, this lineup today. Now, according to MLS injury report, Jeremy Raffanello was not listed as out for today. We do know he was nursing a hamstring injury. Now, Kevin Sullivan was selected for the U17 U.S. World Cup team. So, I mean, theoretically speaking, he could be gone already for their preseason, their warm-up, all that stuff. According to Bradley Carnell, Cavan approached Ernst Tanner and Carnell and said, I want to stick around for at least what they discussed was the first two matches of this playoff series. So it would be tonight's match against the Fire and, of course, the following match at Chicago Fire Stadium. I'm drawing a blank down the name. Soldier Field, I think is what it is. So they allowed him to stay. And when you think about it from a depth perspective, it's huge because you have Alejandro Bedoya, Jesus Bueno, and Ben Bender as your midfield depth behind the people I said a few seconds ago. Without Kevin Sullivan, your only real attacking midfielder was I'm sorry, I drew a blank. I saw a text message, I drew a blank. Behind Milan and Indy, your only attacking midfielder was Alejandro Bedoya because Jesus Bueno is not really much of an attacking midfielder. Now, one of the options that we could have seen tonight was you put Indy Vasiliev, take Indy Vasiliev out, you put Bueno in at the 6 next to Lukic. You then put Danley up top as an attacking mid with Milanowski. I would have liked to see that. But without Kevin Sullivan, you have very limited option. Now we have other playoff games to go to. I'm not exactly thrilled by having such little depth, but I know Raffanello will come back in a few seconds, or in a few matches rather. So kudos to Kevin Sullivan to being selfless, to allowing Bradley Carnell to have some options, at least until Raffanello gets healthy again. So I'm glad we got to see some time from him today. Again, we're going to get to Kevin Sullivan. We're going to get to these players in a few seconds here. But that's the starting 11 for the Union. Now, for Chicago, a major, major absence for Chicago was Zinkernagel not being in the starting rotation. And now we all expected him to start. He came into the match healthy. Of course, we know what he's contributed to the Fire this season. I believe he has 15 goals, 15 assists. A really great season for him so far. But in the pre-match warm-ups, he apparently pulls a muscle. And they have to put, I believe, if I remember correctly, who was it who came in his place? Salisi started in his place. So now we all know Chicago, one of the best scoring teams in MLS. We knew that they can be dangerous in the attack from different players, from different parts of the field. But losing a guy who has contributed to 30 goals so far this season is huge, absolutely huge. So the Union dodged the bullet with Zinkernagel having that injury prior to the game. Now you get to the start of the match. I would say the Union came out okay overall. I don't think that they were overly impressed in the first half. And I think Chicago, kind of the same thing. You could see they were missing their main piece in the attack with Zinkernagel being gone. But the problem that I had with the Union was they just couldn't seem to figure out the Chicago back line, which was a back five to start the match. They ended up switching to a back four later on once the goals came in from the Union. But they started out with a back five. Jack Elliott back there with his black eye and all. And it just seemed like every time the Union tried to push the ball forward, they were either getting blocked in the middle of the field. When it went to the outside of the field, it didn't seem like the ball was moving fast enough to either the left or the right. It didn't seem like the crosses were really getting anywhere near one of the strikers, whether it been Bruno Damiani or Ty Baribo. And it just felt like there was never any cohesion in the final third for the Philadelphia Union. Maybe they had people run into the box, and we saw opportunities with Bruno. We saw opportunities with Indy Vassilev. All of them made runs in the box. Milan Alaski made runs in the box. But once that run was completed and they got the ball, there was just nothing after that. And I talked to our friend Joe, who's in the comments as well. Joe says here they started with a 3-4-3. See, at that point, Joe, they must have switched at some point because it looked like they had moved to a back five. Even the commentators have said they moved to a back five at some point. So they might have been switching between a few things. I'm not entirely sure. I was focused on other things as well. Once they said, I kind of ignored it. But either way, regardless of the formation, the Fire were doing enough to keep the Union well away from Brady and their goal. So then to counter that, the Union found opportunities to shoot at net, but everything was about 20 to 25 yards out. Nothing really tested Brady. You had the one chance from Jovan Lukic, and I think maybe the first 10 minutes or so, give or take. I'm trying to see now where I wrote down the notes when he took the shot. I didn't write down the exact time when he took the shot. But you see Lukic test Brady from like 18 to 20 yards out. Just misses Brady and the corner of the post. But nothing really tested him after that. And what I talked to Valerie and Joe texting throughout the game, it didn't feel like Nathan Harriel was contributing offensively as much as we would have liked. Like I said, we got to the outside of the field, outside the box. We tried to find crosses. Nothing was working. Nothing was working in the center of the field. But every time Nathan Harriel got the ball, it didn't seem like he was willing to take a defender one-on-one. And that comes back to the issues we've had without Quinn Sullivan, without Milan, without that offensive pairing with Milan and Quinn. You didn't have someone who was willing to go one-on-one and push down the field. And every time Nathan got the ball, it seemed like he was trying to do it or was hesitated to do it, and then just pass it back to the middle, pass it back to Jacob, pass it to McConney, whatever. So I think for the first 45 minutes or so, what I was getting frustrated by was that Nathan was not using his speed and his ability to beat his defender and at least go down the right side of the field further, get closer to the end line, and then at that point you're moving the defense, you see some openings happening, and maybe you can get across the box. Because it's not like they were double teaming Nathan Harriel. He had chances periodically throughout the first half, probably throughout the first 50 minutes of the game, where he could have gone down the right side of the field, and it just never felt like it was there. Let me get to the comments first before I continue with our notes. Again, I know we have a lot to talk about, a lot of emotions. People are messaging me like, "You can breathe now. It's okay." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to catch my breath after what was a very stressful night." Um, David Brown says, "What would your message to the world be?" I don't even know what that means. Okay. Uh, Cole says, "It has been 2 months since Ty last scored for us." Yeah, Cole, the last time Ty Baribo scored for us was against Chicago in that 4-0 victory. And even in my match preview, I mentioned that. I said that if anybody was due for a goal, it was Ty Baribo. And unfortunately for tonight, I don't think he had a real chance at net. I don't have Fop Mob up in front of me at this point. I'm just kind of going off my recollection here, but I can't remember him giving a real chance at net. And he hasn't scored for us in a while. And it's frustrating because we know that Bruno Damiani, although he has made his impact more so in the back end of the season, he's still not somebody who has got on a hot streak yet. Micah Uwa, again, as I've said multiple times throughout this year, Micah Uwa has been consistently or has been the most consistent striker from day one to this current point. When he sees his time, he gets a goal, he gets an assist, he stretches the defense, he does those hustle plays that don't always show up on the box score. Micah Uwa has been good throughout the season when he's had the time. Whereas in Bruno, obviously went cold for a long stretch of the season. Ty has been streaky as well. So, but I think Cole, a major thing here is that he hasn't scored in 2 months. That's a problem. If the Union want to keep up with teams like Chicago or Miami or Vancouver, if we make it that far into the MLS Cup, they're going to need their top guys to score. Simple as that. T Mac joins us. Milan is that dude. Yeah, listen, Milan is one of the best acquisitions that I can remember from a Philadelphia team, not even just the Union, because we've had issues with acquisitions mid-season with the Union. But I mean, he reminds me of Harrison Bader from the Phillies. I know if people who watch the Phillies, I know Jillian Allman has come on here and talked about the comparison with the Phillies. He very much feels like that difference maker that was needed. And it's a shame that we couldn't get to see more of him and Quinn Sullivan together. But Milan has been fantastic. And what I like to see the most from him tonight was when he had the chance to make a difference and when he had a chance to take things on upon himself to score, he did that and made it 2-0. So again, we're going to get to Milan a little bit more because I think um, I, I just think that acquisition by Tanner could be the reason why we win MLS Cup this year. Valerie says Ua had a great assist. He absolutely did. McFly says my heart can't take this kind of game. Listen, McFly, after the Eagles game, which is always a stressful moment, experience for all Philly fans. Doesn't matter if it's a tight game or a more relaxed game like we saw towards the back end of the second half for the Eagles. It's been a long day for me. I'm tired mentally from this. After the Eagles game, actually, I took a nap for like half an hour just to recharge my batteries and then get back into the mindset to watch a playoff match. And Valerie says, yeah, her stomach too. Frank, game changed with the subs in the 80th minute. And listen, Frank, I'm actually going to talk about the subs too before that. With Bueno and I'm sorry, with Bueno, with Frankie Westfield and Mike Ua. I thought Carnell made the right subs at the right time. STT Sports Network, yo, what's good? What's up, man? Thanks for joining us. Colin says, we sent out the menaces for the PKs just to get in Brady's head. Colin, I assume you were at Super Park tonight. Maybe. Mandy, you're saying hi from Lot G. I would love to hear from both of you because I was watching this game. In the first minute or two, from watching again from Apple, like from the FS1 broadcast, Sons of Ben were loud in the first couple minutes, and then it just got real quiet. And I'm not sure if it was just because they were tense, they were holding their breath just like the rest of us were, but it got really quiet for a long stretch of time where I heard the drums going, but I didn't hear really any chants. Colin was not there. It's tough to hear that, man. Sorry you couldn't be at the game. But once the goals happened, you heard that, sha la 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 la. The crowd started coming back into it. You heard much more noise. It just didn't feel like the Sons of Ben, or the River End, I should say, not the Sons of Ben. The River End were consistent from the first minute to the 90th minute. That's all. So, actually, Mandy doubles down on that and saying you could hear a pin drop in the second half at parts. Yeah, and listen, Mandy, I get it. We're all stressed out. We're watching this game. We're holding our breath. But for me, the reason why Subaru Park or any Philly arena, doesn't matter where it is, Lincoln Financial Field, Citizens Bank Park, etc., the reason why Philadelphia has such a great home field advantage is because of the crowd. Because we get loud, we stay loud for the entire time. That's my only gripe is that I understand the nervousness, but the players need to have that ruckus behind them. So I would hope that, I guess if we don't come back to play Chicago in this round, but I hope the next round, if we do advance, we get a little bit more juice going in the stands. I want to keep going down this list of my notes here as we discuss the first half. Actually, I talked about that already with the Sons of Ben. Perfect. Now, apparently, according to the commentators, another thing that they mentioned was Chicago has not beaten us since 2013, which was that 12 years ago. Chicago hasn't beaten us at Subaru Park. That didn't seem right. Someone might have to check that for me. Maybe they pulled off draws at Subaru Park in the past. But I heard that. I was like, man, it's been 12 years since Chicago's beaten us in Chester. That seemed kind of odd to me. Okay. And also the thing with the first half and two, it just seemed like the ref was blowing whistles like crazy. It didn't seem like a very fluid game. There was a lot of stopping, which I wasn't really happy about because I wanted the Union to constantly have the game moving, allowing the pressure to tire out Chicago. I didn't like the constant stops, allowing Chicago to catch their breath, allowing Chicago to set up on the attack. It just bothered me. I thought overall the ref tonight was he was okay. I thought he was going to lose control of the game in the first half because of the constant whistles, but ended up overall being an okay night. But let's get to the comments real quick before we continue on to the second half. So we have McFly. Frankie's stare down after the goal was epic. Yeah, the penalty kicks we'll get to in a little bit because I saw that too on the feed. And honestly, the penalty kicks as a whole was filled with drama, which was awesome. And Valerie says here, love that look. Valerie says, and they haven't been in playoffs since 2 months after Cabin was born. Right? Yeah, I saw Matt George posted that they hadn't won a playoff game since like 09 or something like that. Mandy says regarding the referees, blowing whistles but forgetting he had cards on him. How many of our guys got hit in the face with no consequences? Yeah, I was also surprised. Well, no, here's the thing. So early in the match, I want to say within the first 20 minutes, we saw a moment where Bruno Damiani was getting held a bit. And then you see him throw the elbow into the player behind him. I don't remember who he hit at this point. So the referee goes over. Now the commentators have mentioned like, well, that could be a red card if he's throwing an elbow, he's getting up higher. But I'm really glad at that point, Mandy, to your comment here, that he's not card happy right away because the reality is yellow cards accumulate into the next match. A red card, of course, suspends a player for the next match. Like as much as I do want to see a proper game called, and if it's a foul that's hard enough to be deemed a yellow or red, please call it and please issue it. But I'm just glad that he didn't overdo it to the point where it's influencing the rest of this playoff series as well as the rest of the playoffs in general. Mandy says to quote Carnell from the presser, Frankie's Philly. Yeah, Frankie very much is Philly. And then Frank says here, set piece is still an issue. Yeah, Frank, we've had issues defending set pieces throughout this season. And Chicago came in here as well as one of the better set piece teams in the league. They had 15 set pieces. From an offensive standpoint, I think I could count maybe 2 or 3 that were just really high set pieces. It didn't seem like they could find anybody in the box. And of course, you go back to Cole's comment regarding Ty Baribo. Those set pieces, offensively speaking, are great opportunities for people like Kai or people like Ty or even Jacob Glesnes, Macania, Bruno Damiani. It's great opportunities for them to get a header, to get a goal, or at least a shot on target. But it just felt like a couple times today, the set pieces weren't exactly what I was hoping for. And also, we have today what we don't always get to see, but Milan Lasky taking some of the corner kicks, Kai Wagner taking some of the corner kicks. I don't mind Milan taking the corners, but for me personally, if we can just keep it strictly Kai, I would prefer that. I trust his left foot over anybody pretty much on the team. But yeah, set pieces not that great tonight on both sides. And it is what it is. Hopefully we can correct it when we go to Chicago. Valerie says, I can tell you what kind of welcome our dear old Jack will get next time he comes to Chester. Yeah. And of course, Colin says, go figure Jack Elliott was a problem tonight. So again, let's go to the second half. So before I get to the subs, before I get to the penalty kicks and the rest of the drama in this match, I want to take a step back and talk about something that we talked about before the season even started and throughout the season. And then specifically when Bruno Damiani missed the penalty kick. I don't remember when, but earlier this year. I think it was at New York City. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But over the years, we've had pretty reliable penalty kick takers. Daniel Gazdag, of course, right? One of the reasons why he's the Union's leading goal scorer was because of penalty kicks. Granted, he was never that clutch in the biggest moments with penalty kicks, but throughout his tenure, he was pretty much spot on. That's one. Jack Elliott was very good at taking penalty kicks. I mean, we saw it tonight. He gets a miss, which I think is just ironic there. But Jack Elliott throughout his career has been a solid penalty kick taker. He's even learned to take some free kicks as his career has gone on. He's no longer with us. Dano's no longer with us. Jack McGlynn gets sold before the season starts. He's obviously right. He had the ice in his veins thing against Nashville back in during our MLS Cup playoff run. He's no longer with us. He's with Houston. So you have three players who, over the last couple of years, have been your staples as penalty kick takers. You can even include Julian Carranza as being someone who is an option off the bench or on the field as a penalty kick taker. So now you're missing four of them. So entering the second half, as we know, any sub that comes on is going to have to be present for the penalty kicks. So that was one thing that I kept in mind. The second thing was I don't know who's going to take these penalty kicks. We've seen Kai take penalty kicks. We've seen Bueno take penalty kicks. Damiani take penalty kicks. He's been okay on them. Quinn has been our main penalty kick taker, I believe, this year. I think he's taken 2 or 3 of them, maybe 2. But of course, he's out, right, with his ACL. So as we're kind of entering the second half, as it's still 0-0, I'm thinking, who would I put in for my penalty kick? I figured Uwa was going to be an obvious one. I was assuming Danley might be an option as well. Indy Vasiliev, if he stayed for the 90 minutes, he could have been an option. Ty Briba, of course, an option. Jacob Glesnes, maybe. It was. I had a lot of uncertainty and I had a lot of worry that it was going to go to penalty kicks. And frankly, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a big fan of this whole best of 3 series. I think it really punishes the first seed or the better seed with the home field advantage because even if they win, they have to go play somewhere else now to come back. It risks injury, it risks red card, yellow card accumulation, all that stuff. I just don't like it personally, but it is what it is. Let me get to the comments real quick before I get to the second half. Mandy says he got a pretty Philly welcome as was. He's in his villain era here. Talking about Jack Elliott being in his villain era. Mandy says here, Carnell telling Dono to put the penny back on the moment he realized we were going to PKs. I'm glad he did that. I don't think I could have stomached Chris Donovan taking a penalty kick for the Union. Colin says, I'm going to say this right now. Bueno needs to always take PKs if he's on the field. Never felt more confident with him up there. He's got swag and confidence in it. It's nuts. Listen, Colin, I think most of the time penalty kicks comes down to confidence, right? It's similar to a free throw in basketball in the dying seconds of the game. Everybody can take a free kick. Everybody can, or a penalty kick. Everybody can take a free throw. Everybody has the ability to do so, but it comes down to confidence. And as Frank says, I did not look confident prior to PK. You know what's Frank? It's funny you say that because we were having this conversation months ago when Bruno Damiani missed his PK. And I remember saying that I didn't want Uwa to take it. And I could not think why. I just didn't feel like it was going to be the best penalty kick if he took it. And to your point, Frank, he didn't look very confident. It wasn't a terrible PK, but it certainly didn't have the proper angle. And it was far too easy for Brady to save there. So anyway, you're entering the second half. I'm looking at some notes here. The Union opened up a little bit better offensively. We had a shot from Danley, but of course that went over the net. We really dodged the bullet though in that first, I want to say 15 minutes. I didn't write down the minute of this shot on Blake here, but there was a brief moment when Kuipers and Salisi attacked the Union box. They had an opening. Kuipers finds Salisi completely wide open in the box, and he just shanked it completely to the left. Well, I guess to the right of Andre Blake. But at that point, it was one of those games where I felt like the Union were going to control the possession, which they basically did. It felt like one of those games the Union were going to have the better opportunities, which at that point they kind of did. Chicago had a couple moments, but it was never anything too threatening on Blake. It just felt like one of those moments where the ball was going to bounce the wrong way, and that was an opportunity that Chicago had that I thought, okay, this is going to be their goal. They shank it, and then I take a deep breath, and we continue attacking. But something that we see now with Bradley Carnell, who is a finalist for Coach of the Year, by the way, in his first season with the Union. Of course, he wins a Supporter Shield. But one thing we had our gripe with Jim Curtin compared to Bradley Carnell was his subs were too predictable regarding Curtin. You knew that a striker was going to come on at the 60th or 70th minute. You knew it was going to be a like for like subs across the board. You knew everybody was kind of in their role, in their place, no matter how the game was going, no matter if you needed a goal, no matter what. One thing that we've praised Bradley Carnell on throughout the season was that he's just not like that. He plays all his players. He makes subs at different times. He's not afraid to make a sub at halftime. He's not afraid to make a sub even before halftime, which we saw in the Vancouver match. Um, Bradley Carnell seems to be a better reader of the game. He kind of sees the problems a little bit better. So as I'm watching the first half, and again, kind of going back to the points that I made earlier in this conversation, I didn't like the fact that Nathan Harriel was not aggressive enough offensively. I don't really like Nathan Harriel's crosses compared to Frankie's as well. I was texting Joe in the comments here during the halftime saying, listen, I think Frankie should come on, give the Union a bit more spark offensively, and just give him a bit more tenacity. As Mandy said earlier, he's Philly. He's from Philly. He's got the fire. He's got the heat. I'm not saying Nathan Harriel does not. I love Nathan. I think he's a great player. I think he brings a lot of energy, but we just needed a little bit more oomph. And I thought the move to bring Frankie Westfield on, a 19-year-old, by the way, a 19-year-old for a playoff match, a tie playoff match, was a great idea. And then on top of that, we saw the back defensive line. Again, Joe, whether it was a back three, back five, however the Fire were holding down the fort back there. We could see, as I said in the first part of this conversation, the Union could not break that back line. They could not get a good cross. They could not get anything over the middle. It just seemed like every time they went to the final third, it was a wall. So then kudos to Bradley Carnell, bringing on Michael Ua for Bruno Damiani. I thought Bruno was kind of quiet tonight. He had a couple decent moments in the hold-up and in the build-up for certain attacks at net, but nothing really crazy from Bruno Damiani. But what we've seen from Michael Ua throughout the season is his speed, his ability to stretch the defense, and we saw that on full display. So before I get into the rest of these moments here, let me bring up the rest of these comments as you guys kind of flooded me as I started talking about that. SC mentions Bueno 4 for 4 on PKs according to the George. I'm not surprised. Choo Choo is just ice in his veins in that opportunity. SC says, I thought Bariba looked really nervous on the penalty kick too, but he buried it. McFly says Harrell isn't aggressive offensively, but also doesn't back either. Yeah, and that's I think there's times where Nathan does get beat one-on-one because he does fall asleep. I remember there was a goal against San Jose Earthquakes in San Jose where he completely fell asleep on, God, I forget who, but I remember him just being kind of stuck in that no man's land, to your point, McFly. Mandy says here, thought Nate was a good choice to start for his speed against Bamba, but would have put Frankie in a little sooner, like at the half. Yeah, Mandy, I see that's the thing too. You have so many offensive weapons for Chicago. You have great speed for Chicago on the wings. You're absolutely right. Bamba is a threat against Philly, and someone like Nathan Harrell can track him down. He can body him because he's a little bit bigger than Frankie, and he can also go up defensively on the set pieces. So I don't fault Carnell for picking either player because again, there's an argument to be made for either player. But Mandy, I'm glad that you also agree. At the half, put in Frankie would have been fine, and I think Carnell saw in that first 15 minutes that things were not necessarily progressing the way they should have. And then he made his subs in the 62nd, 63rd minute. And even you saw his impact right away. Again, we're talking about yellow card accumulation. Valerie, I see your point here. Vancouver's up 1-0 to half. Michael Ua comes on. Not long after he sees the pitch, there is a point where the Union are breaking towards Chicago net, and Waterman basically tackles Michael Ua. And it earns Waterman a yellow card. And again, if you're thinking about yellow card accumulation, if Waterman gets a yellow card in the next match, I assume he'll be out for the third game. If it gets to a third game, I'll have to see the rules for yellow card accumulation for playoffs. That's what I would imagine it would be. But he makes his immediate impact. His ability to break the defensive line, his speed off the ball helps get that yellow card for Waterman. Let's see here. Also, if you're looking at further impact from Michael Ua, there was a moment where Ilofsky found Ua, who opened the field, and then he chipped it into Indy and trying to see what the goal was. Oh, I think that was the goal. Was that the goal? I'm looking here now through my notes. Yeah, that was the goal. Okay, I apologize. So let's back it up a little bit. So in the goal, Milan Lasky finds Ua, and Ua gets the assist. I think Valerie mentioned earlier the assist from Michael was perfect. But kudos to Indy Vasilov. Again, we've talked about him throughout the season. We've been critical on him throughout the season. I think one thing we mentioned early on was he held onto the ball too long. He's not as creative as Quinn Sullivan. He doesn't rip it as well as Quinn Sullivan or as Milan Alaski does. But we have seen progression from Indy Vasilov, who is also still a very young player. And as the season gone on, we've seen him make more of an impact at goal, scoring goals. He's had a couple of assists as well. He's been okay at that, but specifically with scoring goals, he's had his opportunities to score, and he's finished it pretty well. So you have the cross from Micah Ua. Indy just puts his chest out, traps it perfectly at his feet, and at that point, you can get jittery after the trap and hit it right at the keeper, or sky it over the net even though you're very close, or try to cut it back and make one too many touches. There's a time when you're in front of net like that where sometimes you overthink, and I thought Indy Vasilov played it perfectly. Gets it, chests it direct to the far right post behind Brady with his left foot. And at that point, there was some more relief for me from from watching this game, because prior to that, I'm thinking it's going to go to PKs 0-0. We're going to lose. I was thinking all Negadelphia, but you see that moment and you see the immediate impact from these substitutions, specifically Michael Ua, and providing an assist for Indy Vasilov, who, again, if we're going to advance through this MLS Cup playoffs, we need Indy Vasilov to step up. It cannot just be all Milan Alaski. It can't just be on the strikers. Indy has to perform week in and week out. He doesn't have to be perfect, but when he gets his chances, he has to capitalize on those chances. And kudos to him for doing it. Kudos to Bradley Carnell for allowing him to stay in the match and get that opportunity. And even the formation set up the way it was to put Milan and Indy together. So continue on here. After the first goal, we had a yellow card on Lukic. So there's one point where Lukic overran his defender. He gets a yellow card. So we'll have to watch him for the next game as well to see how the yellow card accumulation goes. But then we saw a typical Union goal not long after that yellow card from Lukic. So Danley forces a turnover. In that turnover, Lukic gets the ball back. Again, we've talked about this throughout the season. The MVP of the team, in my opinion, you probably ask Jose Nunez the same thing, has not just been one player, but the pairing of Lukic and Danley. And we've seen at times throughout the season where one will force a turnover, the other will create. In this, typically, you'd say it's probably Danley creating, but in this instance, Danley forces a turnover. Lukic gathers the ball. He finds Brebo. Kudos to Brebo to find a cutting Milan who beats his defender, gets wide open behind the back line. And at that point, you had an opportunity for Milan to pass the ball. And it goes back to the point I made a few minutes ago. He just he's not afraid to take it upon himself. We saw later on in the second half, too. He had a chance from outside the 18. He let it rip. And that's just who the player he is. That's who he is. He will attack, and he'll take a shot no matter what. So he cuts it back on his left foot. It's a perfect goal by Milan Lasky. And at that point, it's 2-0. I think you're in the, 70-something minute, 80th minute at that point. I'm feeling great. But you need players like that to step up, especially when Barrebo's not, on a hot streak, when Bruno Damiani's not scoring at all, when Kai and Frankie really aren't getting great service into the box. It's why you brought Milan Lasky in, because you saw what happened when Quinn Sullivan was not in this lineup. Because remember, Milan didn't start with us this year. He was with San Diego, and shame on them for letting him go. But we saw what happened when Quinn is not in this lineup. The whole offense just died because Indy Vasilov could not do it on his own in the attacking mid. So you bring him along to have these moments like this. Again, I can't speak highly more. I can't, I guess, add more adjectives than I already had regarding Milan Lasky. He's been fantastic tonight. He's been fantastic throughout the season. Valerie says Danley or Lukic. what a or trying to do a nickname thing, Lukely or Danich, what a pair. I don't know. Whatever you want to nickname the two of them, Valerie. If you can think of the nickname, I'll try to promote a great nickname for the pairing of Jovan Lukic and Danley Jean-Jacques. Mandy says here, hate seeing JoJo subbed out, but it was so smart after the yellow. Yeah, and we're gonna get to the next level of subs here in a few seconds here. So, Bamba takes a shot, forces Blake into a save. He keeps us alive there. Chicago at this point then switches to the back four. Joe, I know you mentioned that as well in my text message. They're now trying to at least get themselves back into this match. Again, kudos to Carnell. I do think he made the right subs at this point. I know the goals came after these substitutions, but I don't think it was the substitutions that caused these necessarily. So Jesus Bueno comes on in this 82nd minute for Jovan Lukic. Again, Jovan with the yellow card. That's a smart play. Kevin Sullivan comes on for Indy Vasiliev. I think if it was a 1-0 game, you probably don't see that happen. You probably allow Indy Vasiliev to finish out the match. Or if you are trying to bring on a midfielder to close out a 1-0 game, it's possible you bring Alejandro Bedoya in and maybe you shift the formation around, or maybe you keep him as an attacking mid. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not saying that maybe Carnell thought the game was over, so you figure why not get Cavan some minutes in the 82nd or 83rd minute. But is what it is. I don't think Cavan was bad necessarily. He had a good chance where he almost gave Frankie an opportunity to score a goal. But you see Cavan come in to finish this match in 83rd minute. And I guess maybe if you want to look at corner kicks too, or penalty kicks as well, Alejandro Bedoya has mentioned earlier in his career with the Union that he's not the biggest fan of taking penalty kicks. So maybe you bring Kevin Sullivan in to take a penalty kick, but for a 16-year-old, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, I know he's got the swagger and I know he's got the Man City reputation behind him, but that's a lot of pressure to put on a 16-year-old. And the reality is, if it went beyond 5, 6, 7 players, Kevin's probably in front of Blake taking a penalty kick. I don't know where he'd fall in the pecking order there, but there was a real chance that Kevin could have taken a penalty kick. Valerie says for the nickname for Danley and Lukic, Danjo. You know what? I kind of like it. Get a banjo and play for Danjo. I don't mind that, Valerie. I like that nickname. Mandy says here was hoping for Ali. He's great at boosting morale towards the end of the matches and gives it his all. Yeah. For anyone who's been a Union fan as long as I have, I always kind of go back to whenever I think of a defensive closer, I think of Warren Creval. You brought him on to close out a match. That's kind of how I envision Alejandro Bedoya now. He's a veteran, savvy player, has obviously great IQ for the game. You come on to close out the match. So would I like to see Alejandro Bedoya? Yeah. I think if there was a 2-0 lead still, maybe Ali gets on the final minutes to just help close out the match. I think at that point they still have one more sub left. But is what it is. Kind of things fell as they needed to fall. So now, let's get to the goal. So you have a corner kick almost immediately after the substitutions. The corner kick from Chicago bounces off the post, finds Bamba, basically unmarked, wide open, scores a goal. Now, Andre Blake was pleading to the head official for a good couple minutes about something. He kept raising his arm. I'm not sure if Blake got hit at some point off that corner kick, or if he thought he got bumped off the goal while he was trying to make a save. I'll have to rewatch it. I was watching it live on FS1. I didn't feel like pausing at that time, so I'll have to rewatch it again. But Andre Blake was livid after that first goal, not at his players, but at the referee for not calling something. So there was a point where you saw the referee kind of have his hand up to the headset. They didn't call for VAR. They didn't think it was necessary. So now it's 2-1. At that point, I'm still feeling confident because it was kind of a fluky goal. It hits the crossbar. Like, it was just this weird bounce. I was like, okay, we're still up 2-1. I feel okay. The Union were better in the second half than they were in the first half. Whatever. So then you continue this match, and then you have the Kevin Sullivan gets basically completely taking his legs out from under him by Jack Elliott. Jack Elliott gets a yellow card. So now there's a couple players from the Chicago Fire backline between Waterman and Jack Elliott who have yellow cards going into the next match. So he gets a yellow card. And then again, I go back to the point where Kevin had that opportunity to feed Westfield. Westfield can't get a shot on net, etc. Now you have 6 minutes of stoppage time. At this point, The 6 minutes of stoppage time just felt like a little too long, and it brought me back to the troubles that the Union have had throughout the season. I'd say most of these troubles came in the middle part of the season, whether it be April, that's probably May into June, in terms of stoppage time miscues. We saw it against Houston, Columbus, Miami. We saw it twice against Montreal. This team continued to give up opportunities in stoppage time. And then on top of that, Jacob Glesnes commits a pretty hard foul just outside the box. He gets a yellow card prior to the next match in Chicago, and ultimately leads to what the second goal for Chicago. So the free kick hits the wall. The wall can't kind of recover fast enough to the ball once it leaves the box, and Jack Elliott, of all people, hits a fantastic free kick, a fantastic one-timer, a very low one-timer. I'm not sure if it ricocheted off a Union player. It had kind of an outward curve to it, but it just barely finds the far corner of the Union goal, just barely beats a lunging Blake. And at this point now, I'm not sure if we can win this in regulation or, stoppage time, because Chicago had just taken all the momentum, and within about a 12-minute span, what felt like an easy win was now going to be a nail biter. Mandy says from Andre Blake's body language, it seemed like he got pushed down the box. Yeah, I'll have to, again, watch it again, Mandy, and see if I can see exactly what he was complaining to the ref about. Valerie says, it's my fault for bragging about the clean sheets and jinxing it. Yeah, Valerie, you were talking a lot about clean sheets, and then all of a sudden, we blow 2 goals. So I'm gonna blame this one on you, Valerie, for sure. And listen, the Union have had, I think, 14 clean sheets on the year. They've shut Chicago out twice. They looked like they were en route to shutting them out a third time. I don't blame you for talking clean sheets. I really was expecting that to be the result tonight after I saw those 2 goals go in, and it just wasn't meant to be. So now, let's get to the end of this match. Let's get to the chaos that was the final few minutes. So Kai and Gutierrez go at it. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I think it was Oriegal. Comes out of nowhere, just shoves Kai to the ground. He immediately gets shown a red card. Gutierrez gets a yellow card for clipping Kai Wagner in the back. So now Chicago's playing with 10 men. You already now have Oriegal now out for the next match in Chicago. I thought the Union were going to try to get one more chance on that. They almost did with 2 corner kicks late. Frankie ended the match with a really clear chance in net, but he skied over the goal, which seemed to happen 4 or 5 times tonight. And then you get to penalty kicks. So McFly says, I think having to go to PKs at home will make us hungry going to Chicago instead of thinking it will be a cakewalk. Yeah, listen, McFly, if anything, it woke us up a little bit, right? We talked about it being a bit of a slow first half, not exactly the most threatening performance by the Union in the first 60 minutes. Things like this could be a problem, or rather a motivator, I should say, and be a problem for Chicago. Because now, even though we have the win, we're going to come into Chicago a bit more feisty, maybe a bit more juice, a bit more energy in our step, and hopefully just take care of business out in Soldier Field and go to the next round of the playoffs. And Mandy says Kai got the yellow for pushing too. Yeah, so yellows go all the way around. We'll have to be very careful in Chicago because I could see yellow cards coming out against the Fire a second time. And unfortunately, that could really impact. If we do win in Chicago, that could impact us in the second round of the playoffs, whether we play Charlotte or New York City. So now we get the PKs. Again, the penalty kick takers for the Union tonight were Micah Ua, Frankie Westfield, Milan Lasky, Ty Brebo, and Jesus Bueno. I don't know how people want to approach this. You put your best penalty kick taker first, let him start things on a good note. Do you put him somewhere in the middle of the pack? Do you put him towards the end on the 5th spot? In case it gets to the 5th penalty kick, he's going to be the most capable person to take it. But if you're looking about who's on the field at the time, let's kind of go through the 11 players on the field. After the substitutions, we had Andre Blake, McConaughey, Glesnes, Kai, Frankie, Bueno, Cavan, and Michael. If you're looking at that list, if you're thinking who's going to take a first penalty kick, it's either going to be Baribo or Milan for me. I don't hate that Ua was the first one to take it. I don't know if I would have trusted him later on. In Bueno's situation, would I have trusted Michael Ua to finish his job? I don't think so. So it's almost like I'd rather have him start first and just like, okay, even if he misses it, we still have 4 or 5 opportunities to get back into this penalty kick shootout. Mandy says Frankie's second surprised me, but was not mad about it. Reset the tone. Yeah, listen, Mandy, it reminds me very much. Again, I'll bring this up. Jack McGlynn when he took his penalty kick against Nashville, and again did the ice in his vein things. It's that Philly tenacity, that local kid tenacity that we have really enjoyed so far from Frankie Westfield, and what we've enjoyed so far from the Philadelphia Union. So Frankie comes up, or I'm sorry, Uwa misses his shot. Brady gets a save. Jack Elliott comes up, but at this point, I'm thinking Jack's gonna be the one that's gonna send us home tonight with a loss. Kudos to Andre Blake. Maybe going against Jack for all those years benefited him at this in this current moment, but he chooses the right way, catches the ball, doesn't let it roll underneath of him. It's back to 0-0. Frankie gets Frankie gets a PK, and then Frankie stares down Brady for like a good 4 or 5 seconds, and then after that, Gutierrez scores on Blake. Now Milanovsky comes up, he gets a penalty kick, he gets a goal, he gets the ball, and he holds on to it for a couple seconds as he's pumping up the crowd. Now Brady comes out of nowhere, shoves or tries to get the ball from Milan, kind of gives him a nudge. Milan goes and shoves Brady. Now Andre Blake's getting in the mix. There, there was so much chippiness tonight between these two sides. Not surprising whatsoever, considering the players we have on the field. But I think to your point, Manny, with the tone, I think the tone throughout the match was that we were going to play tough. But the tone at that point, from a mental standpoint, was, yeah, we might have missed the first PK, but you guys missed the first PK too, and we're going to be coming out, guns ablazing with attitude, and we're going to make sure that Brady feels uncomfortable. And kudos to Milan and Frankie for having that tone and getting the team and the fans amped up. Mandy says, "I'm taking my ball and going home." That was very much what it felt like. So then Kuipers comes up. I had a feeling he was going to make it, and I'm surprised Andre got a hand on it, but he just barely does. Can't keep it out net. Kuipers scores. Baribo comes up. I think McFly mentioned it earlier. Whoever mentioned it. Baribo's nervous. He still makes a shot. No problems. But then Waterman comes up. I'm fairly certain Waterman was with Montreal before he came to Chicago. I want to say that's correct. A pretty nice addition from Chicago this year to add him into this team. He obviously has been a big part of the reason why they made the playoffs. He's a good player. I'm pretty sure he's had U.S. national time as well, or whatever team he's part of. I think he's been called up once. But Waterman hits a crossbar. And again, going back to the comparisons from past years, it reminded me of Hani Mukhtar, or was it Zimmerman? One of the two who skied it over the net against Nashville. I always go back to that Nashville penalty kick shootout. But it started to mirror that a little bit in terms of how their players were just not finishing their shots. And then Choo Choo comes up. And I love that Carnell went with Jesus Bueno at that point. We seen him have these moments in Leagues Cup, which is not the same magnitude as MLS Cup. I get it. I don't care. It's still a big moment, a qualifying moment to advance to the next round of a playoff or a tournament. And he just nailed it. Jesus Bueno nailed it. And we've talked throughout the season about Jesus has not got enough time in the early portions of the season. We talked about even though when he has gotten time, he hasn't really made a huge impact. Like, yeah, we saw him score the banger against Charlotte at home earlier this year, the game that Marcus Anderson won the game in the dying seconds. We've seen him have a couple good moments. We've also seen some bad moments from Jesus Bueno. If you remember, he's the reason why Houston gets a penalty kick and Jack McGlynn scores in Houston in stoppage time in the first half. And then he gets another penalty kick against Vancouver, or he gets another handball in Vancouver, I think it was, that leads to a penalty kick. So as the bright spots that Bueno's had, he's had some pretty negative portions of his season so far too. So I'm happy for Bueno. I thought Carnell overall picked the right players in the right order. They all came up and answered the call to the best of their ability. But I'm happy for Bueno. I think if you look back at this season, if we end up winning MLS Cup and you look throughout the players throughout the year and their impact, one of the people that you can probably easily forget is Jesus Bueno. But at the same time, it's moments like this that you will remember his impact on the season. And also he's been healthy for us too. Throughout most of the year, he's been healthy. He's been reliable. He's been there off the bench. And he has gotten a little bit better as the season's progressed too. So I'm happy for Jesus. I'm happy for the Union. Did they deserve to walk away with a win? You could argue they probably did not, considering they blew a 2-0 lead in the dying minutes of that game. But a win is a win. It's the playoffs. Things aren't always going to be pretty in the playoffs. All that matters is finding a way to win. And that's what the Union have done throughout the season. They've found ways to win. They found ways to earn points. Even when it didn't look like they could have earned points or that the opponent was too big, they found a way to do it. And this team just seems to have Chicago's numbers so far. We've beaten them 3 times this year. And I'm very confident now going to Chicago and at least taking the penalty kicks. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Carnell does go with Frankie Westfield in the back four with Makania and Glesnes and Kai. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ua even gets a start and maybe Bruno Damiani comes off the bench. Because even though you don't want to look too far ahead, this is an elimination game now for Chicago, and you want to play your best 11, there is still a reality that this is a long playoff stretch. You have a good 6-week periods of the playoffs. You want to have a healthy roster. There does have to be some, and I say some very lightly. There has to be some, awareness of health and stamina. Kai Wagner, for example, he's going to play all 3 games if it's all 3 games against Chicago. He's going to play all 90 minutes against Chicago unless it's a blowout. We have to make sure that he can stay healthy throughout this entire playoff. So kudos to the Philadelphia Union. They got the job done tonight. Valerie says here, Vancouver 2 now after Mueller lands a PK. And Mandy says, love this little kiss or whatever the gesture was to Brady too. Yeah, again, Mandy, going back to the tenacity of this team, the fight of this team. I love them. I really do. So let me wrap this show up. I know the all about the birds people have to get on the streamcast now, StreamYard, to do their show at 9:15. So I'm gonna get off now, wrap things up. The Philadelphia Union have earned a 2-2, or rather a 2-2 regulation draw, but a penalty kick shootout win against Chicago Fire. I'm Mike Barrera at mbarrera1323 on Twitter. You can follow us on AAT Sports Network on Facebook or AAT Sports _ on Twitter. I think it's AAT Sports on YouTube as well as the handle. You'll have to fact check me on that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We'll be back again for a post-game show after the next match as well. I'm not exactly sure when that is. I don't have the calendar in front of me at this point. But the last 2 comments here, Frank says, style points don't count. Just win, baby. Yeah, listen, Frank, a win is a win. I don't care if it's 1-0 or 100-0. As long as you win, that's all that matters. And Manny says, speaking of healthy, great seeing Quinn Sullivan moving around. And, of course, the drummer tonight, Mandy, was Quinn Sullivan. I'm happy to see that. And Carnell has mentioned his presence has been great. So this is Across the Pitch, Union post-game show. Thanks for everybody for joining us. Go Union. Go Birds.